Is that better or is that better in terms of my blur? Is that a good blur or is that a better blur?
Show me the other one again. No, the previous one was better.
Yeah, too much blur.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can see we're live. There's always a little bit of latency, but
Sure.
But we'll see. I'm
you're
curious to see how the
recording?
mic picks up. Yeah, YouTube records automatically when you live stream through YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And it records in real time, so when it finishes, it'll just be there, which is handy. I've had such a challenge keeping up with the pace of my podcasts because of the editing and everything. I'm starting to think maybe I'll just live stream some conversations and then
Post-production, yeah.
they're there. Exactly, real time post production. It's a lazy way, but
that's what Joe does, right? He just goes blah. No editing.
He edits. Well, he doesn't edit the conversations themselves, but there is still a lot of post production in terms of audio, in terms of video quality, and then he splices up. I mean, yeah, obviously he's got a team of.
I was hearing an interview with him and Sam Harris, I think it was, and they were talking about the different formats, highly edited and non-edited at all.
No, I think what they're referring to is, do you cut out bits and pieces to manage the flow, or do you keep it raw in terms of what's actually said in the interview? So in that sense, he doesn't edit. I don't edit either in that sense. The only thing I'll edit out of my other interviews is like if if someone's at the door and someone gets you're kind of pausing, you cut that out. Some people don't even do that. They'll just keep rolling and just go with it. I think that's a little bit pointless.
I think it's a bit disrespectful to the audience as well, to be honest.
Yeah, but with Joe, that's not going to happen because he does it in studio. So the person's right there. There's no distractions. It's a controlled environment.
Yeah, sure. Go.
All right. So it's 10:01.
In the spirit of trying not to be right, feels like it's time to start.
Yeah, I think so. So, tell me what you thought about this topic.
I love this topic. I think it's really topical, at least for us in Sydney, who's got Freedom Day tomorrow, accordingly, apparently, and it was interesting to notice through the media that they were talking about coming out of lockdown anxiety and how that relates to like what changes and the plans that everyone has, haircuts, facials, massages, going to the beach, going beyond 5 kilometers, seeing family, all that kind of stuff. And that they could all be desires, right? They're all desires and they're all goals, right? That we set ourselves. So it's kind of topical. And my question would be, who's the one who wants to get the haircut? And people go, what do you mean? It's me, I want to get a haircut, it's topical for me because my hair's all over the place and my beard. But actually, it doesn't bother me. But being able to like notice in the midst of those desires, which are energetic thoughts, feelings, sensations associated with patterns of mind, that we convince ourselves that we're the ones who've got the desire and we're the ones who've got the goal and that we're going to achieve that goal. But I think it's futile because I think in my direct experience, the body just does what it does, and we just add a commentator on there to make it feel like we're in charge of what's going on and whether we achieve those goals. This is the paradox of the goals thing, right?
Yeah, so I deliberately, when I thought about this title, I thought the futility of desire being different to the paradox of goals. And
Yeah, right.
for me, it was that there seems to be this paradox of goals are important and they're certainly encouraged by society. But how do you reconcile that with the, not even spiritual, but just generally, I think in the broader world of personal development and self-help, it's considered pretty mainstream and normal to advise somebody not to get attached to the outcome, right? It's almost a cliche. And it's something that I've explored, sort of explored for many years. What does it actually mean? What does it mean to have goals and set goals and want stuff but not get attached to the outcome, because ultimately desire is futile. But the desire is futile part, I think, is not something that people naturally extend, that attachment to outcomes thing. So for me, this idea just popped into my head that maybe just wanting something is actually futile. And I'll give you a bit of context. What happened is I joined this discussion group, and I was coincidentally thinking about this already a little bit, but it got prompted by this conversation that I won't go into too much of the detail just to respect privacy, but there was a question of what do you want in a structured format of this facilitated discussion group. And I really struggled with this question. And I think what's happened since you and I have been having these conversations before we started live streaming, just, before several weeks ago, maybe even several months ago, when we started semi-regularly talking about just stuff, is I started to realize that I had this weird frustration with myself that I didn't know what I wanted, and came to start to let go of this attachment to wanting to want stuff, like feeling like that was some sort of a prerequisite for normalcy, to say that I need to have certain desires. And you remember that conversation we had when you were over at my place?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I realize that what happens is a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but some people have this experience of not necessarily having any particular desires, and not feeling a very attached energy to those desires. But then the pressures of setting goals means that they just come up with arbitrary goals or arbitrary desires that they feel anxiously attached to, which they don't actually care about, but they're like, okay, may as well strive for career progression, may as well strive for more money, may as well strive to, buy a house or fancy a car. So to me, there's something in that about the paradox, which is, is it really such a bad thing if you don't have that energetic attachment to desiring something?
Well, that's, I think, very insightful because it highlights maybe a depth of awareness around and curiosity and inquiry into how we've had desires in the past and had goals in the past and maybe achieved them and got there and realized, oh, that wasn't very satisfying. We build a picture in our mind around what it would feel like and why I want to achieve this certain goal to meet a certain desire. I like to kind of use those two things as sort of similarly. And then I don't know how many people get there and then go back to when you set the goal and did a sanity check to see, oh, was this what I was the outcome of the felt experience that I was going to achieve or experience when I achieved the goal? Does that match with the expectation that I had when I set the goal? And I think goals and desires are all about one thing, really. At the end of the day, it's all about achieving happiness, a fundamental level of happiness. Some people might call it contentment, achievement, growth, learnings, wisdom. But underneath all that is the desire to find happiness. And I think for a lot of people to hear that, oh, I can have that happiness without having to achieve that goal. I think it's interesting to achieve the goal because you can learn from that. You use the compelling. Without a goal, I think you potentially may get in the way of putting yourself to the test to achieve the goal. Like what do you learn along the path? There was a saying that I used to use a lot, which was it marry the process, divorce the results.
Nice. I haven't heard
And
that before.
yeah, marry the process, divorce the results. So I really love the process of learning, of setbacks, of unintended consequences, of discovering, oh, I don't have the capacity or the competency to achieve that goal yet. But we all get caught up in such a binary perspective associated with either I achieve the goal or I don't achieve the goal, but we don't realize how much did we learn along in the path to achieving that goal, the attempt to achieve that goal. And so when I think there's an opportunity to really enjoy the being in the process of achieving the goal.
So you're generally in favor of setting goals?
Look, I was a big goal setter and task and productivity guy and blah, 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 and lists, checklists. And at some point, it got to a point where after I ticked off my 10 to-dos for the day, I felt zero satisfaction. I thought that was the goal until I got to the goal and I realized, oh. And then I experimented with maybe 2 years of no goal setting and being in the moment, presencing, and really fine-tuning my awareness in the present to access presence. And I noticed more things got done.
Was that before or after you exited? You sold your company?
What after? Yeah. So, and when I did have that exit and was successful, I was still unhappy. More so. Okay, I had more money, and I had some level of self-confidence, and it built my self-esteem and being able to achieve that goal, a goal. But what I realized, the goal was futile. The goal was futile for my fundamental well-being. And so then I, did a reverse pivot and went deeper versus chasing external things for happiness. At the end of the day, coming back to first principles, why? Why are we doing this? I have a desire. Why? What are you looking to achieve? I have a goal. Why? What are you looking to accomplish? What will you get when you get there? What will it feel like? And I think coming back to the paradox of goals. Goals are great when you can achieve them. I think maybe we'll put it this way. I think they're important depending on the stage you're at in life, as in terms of your own personal realization. Let's call it that. At some stage, goals don't become that important. What becomes important is the intention of how you want to live your life.
What's the difference? Isn't that a goal as well?
A goal is a conceptual construct of something that I put out there, and when I achieve it, I'll be something. An intention is a way of shifting your basis of operation in the way you see the world.
Okay.
And so it's actually all encompassing versus dependent on an outcome.
All right. I got two questions about that, and you can choose which one to start with. So one is, how do you apply that to with your coaching startup founders? Secondly, how would you apply that principle to something like a goal of weight loss, let's say? You used to be big in bodybuilding. You were ripped and jacked, and you know how fitness and body recomposition works.
Did all that. Yeah, did all that.
Yeah. So yeah, those two scenarios, like, because to me that's always a big one, right? Like, if someone asks, "What do you want?" and I say, "I have no energetic charge to it," but then there's this part of me that says, "Yeah, I'd like to buy a house. I'd like to get a bit fitter. I'd like to, not a bit actually. I'd like to get a lot fitter. I'd like to, yeah, but I don't feel this. I don't feel like, I feel the opposite of anxiety about wanting any of those things at the moment, when there was a time when I did. So to me, it's really interesting that those goals are still meaningful, obviously, because otherwise you get complacent. You don't do anything about it. So
that's an assumption.
Okay, go ahead. Because to me, that's where the paradox lies as well. But what's the assumption? What's the assumption?
Okay, well, the assumption is that without a goal, I'll be complacent and lazy and miss out on whatever. Your intention on being a contributor in society, a deep thinker, challenging status quo, holding, sharing this kind of content, has, we didn't really goal set for this, right? I mean, this kind of happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't a burning, and it was a conversation we had where you helped me shift the reason why we should do this, right? Outside of what my default reason was, look, I don't really care about, followers and all that kind of stuff. And I'll respond to people who ask me questions. That's fine. But then you said, no, it's an opportunity to express. And that's a being conversation. Being able to put ourselves in the context and to see what arises without very little planning, and just maybe trying to stick to a theme and coming at it through multiple dimensions that is unorthodox and non trying to be right. So it's already happening. And so to come back to, you don't feel any angst because you don't have any goals. Or should I feel angst because I don't have any goals, or I don't feel a desire? Sorry, don't feel an attachment to goals. I don't think that's a problem at all. That's a societal level, and it's a bought level. It's a conditioned level of impetus on what we should do. So the should do, which is future tense. But in the present, which is the only place that anything actually ever happens, nothing happens in the future. Nothing happens in the past. You can only go with what's in front of you right now. And I don't know if you wanted to go here, but what you notice in the present is already happened. What you're aware of has already happened.
Yeah.
So if it's already happened, what is how can you set the goal? Because if you set the goal, that's already happened. You set a goal, and you set a goal, but you may have set a goal out of a desire to be better, do better, be recognized as, whatever it might be, and that's great. But it's based on the fallacy of it's all bankrupted because it's thought telling you're believing your thoughts.
Okay. I feel like this is the kind of thing that we should try not to be right about. It's that flavor of my value about what is a goal is more meaningful than your value of a goal, which I think quickly, not you and me, obviously, but just generally speaking. And then, someone's desire to be a better person is more right than someone's desire to, I don't know, get 6-pack abs.
No, it's all perfect. There's no difference between the two.
So how do you choose?
You don't choose.
So
You're
what do
not
you do
choosing.
with your so what do you do with your startup founders? Tell me that then.
I don't know how quantum you want me to get, but
No, actually, I don't want to start there. I want to start practical because look,
practically.
look.
All
This
right,
is a con.
practically,
Like,
there's an energy behind every entrepreneur
hmm,
in trying to achieve a certain goal, solve a certain problem. Yeah,
yeah. I
and
mean, it's the very nature of startups, right? It's you're
yeah,
very growth oriented and therefore very rapidly goal setting.
yeah, and it's a way to measure progress.
Hmm.
But those entrepreneurs who have an authentic connection to a problem they're solving because they've experienced it personally or through witnessing in the flesh the problem that as it stands today, and then they get energized by wanting to solve the problem. Those entrepreneurs versus the ones who don't have an authentic connection to the problem um, are much more successful in the long run. Historically, they've proven it, right? Because they have a burning need to solve the problem because they see the suffering or the challenges associated with not having solved that problem. And so what ends up happening is that in the pursuit of solving that problem, your unique expression, right, your consciousness wants to actually come through and solve that problem as a result of your unique expression of who you uniquely are. That's why there can't
Hmm.
be any right or wrongs. Whatever, 13 years ago, I wanted to compete and get up on stage and created a compelling event to work out hard to experience that. Now, a lot of water has passed since a lot of time has passed and insights gained since then. But for me, it was, can I push myself to that extent? Can I get to that level and to bend the reality of my self perception? That was my goal. It wasn't to win. It was to, can I get good enough not to get laughed up on stage in a
Hmm.
compelling, very compelling event, and invited all my family and friends so that if I wasn't good, I'd be embarrassed. There'd be some kind of repercussions, consequence,
Hmm.
as an example. So that was a journey that helped me realize. That came out of that. The biggest takeaway was like I could never try and do that now. Like I think that's just crazy. 13 times a week that I was in the gym, it's crazy. But there was something that was driving. There was a driving force to be able to overcome my self-defeating beliefs associated with the ability to get good enough to be in a competition. In that example, it's just one example. The similar fuel for the fire was associated with being an entrepreneur myself and wanting to right the wrongs of all the organizations I've worked at before in terms of the culture they built and the reason for their existence and the problem they were solving. And that there was a big compelling event and big compelling consequences because then we had mouths to feed, and then slowly you start to achieve certain milestones and you go, oh, this is actually working. And then again, self-belief. I think the path is set the goal, a little bit of a stretch goal to see whether you can achieve it. And when you achieve it, does your sense of self change? Your abilities, your potential, your knowledge, your skill, your network, your know-how. And then it becomes a learning journey versus a tick the box journey. And then there's more substance to it. And I think maybe there's a bit of, for me personally, it's a bit of balance. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like that's what I started with, but it was pretty close. I mean, I was working really heavily with a life coach who really helped me fine tune unpeel the onion to a point where I realized, oh, maybe I should be an entrepreneur, because I obviously struggle working in other organizations who don't treat their people well. Let me give it a go. Maybe it's impossible. And then, lo and behold, I think it was a great result.
Was it a desire that you had articulated at some point?
Yeah, many times over. Yeah.
So was it, like in hindsight, was it not futile to have that desire?
It wasn't futile, no. It wasn't futile. I saw a problem. I had an authentic connection to the problem. Poor culture, work cultures, poor leadership. And didn't set the goal saying I'm going to be the best leader in the world with the most team in the world and blah, blah, blah. But I just kind of went, how would it be to set up the scaffold to build a conscious team, in this case? And maybe the byproduct of that is success on, on the usual rating scale. That's being honest.
So what resonates about, I know I'm asking all the questions, but it's just very interesting.
Yeah, I need to ask
picking on your experience with this stuff. No, I'm just very curious. So how do you resonate with this idea of futility of desire, in the sense that, actually desire is futile? Or is that a paradox in itself?
Desire is futile if it takes you away from your goal. Yeah.
How does desire take you away from your goal?
From a self-discipline perspective, if you have a desire to go to the beach when you should be getting out certain, certain milestones, achieving certain milestones, then you've used your short-term desire to affect your long-term goals, or your big goal, or your intention. Now I've mixed the goals with intentions. So, desires are great, but they're typically futile because they're just in the moment. And they're typically associated with biases and certain beliefs, like the desire to be liked on Facebook. I was watching on social platforms and all that kind of stuff. So, like I saw a documentary on Netflix on fake famous, and they're taking an experiment of trying to make.
Is that what it's called? Fake famous?
Fake famous, yeah. Make this just. Sorry, I've got a cat trying to get out. Just give me a sec.
All right.
Do you want to get out? There you go. Apologies. And they take 3 randoms and they make them famous. And they just buy bots and comments and everything. And they just basically totally broke Instagram. Because everyone, the whole thing is fake. The whole thing's fake.
Yeah.
But how people's lives change when they get 150,000. How people's lives change when they get 150,000 Instagram followers. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, sorry, we've gone off on a tangent there.
That's okay.
But that's an example of how desire can be futile. I'll be happy when I have 150,000 Instagram followers. Okay, on the surface level, you may be getting treated differently, getting sent stuff you want to promote and all that kind of stuff. But what are you giving up? What are you sacrificing for that desire? Privacy? The ability to have no plan today and just do whatever I feel like, versus having to go to different places, get photos and promote product that you probably don't really care about too much, but pays you money, and you get pulled away.
Yeah, but I think that's still a judgment call on that desire,
It
on
is.
that goal. People have a desire or a goal, and I'll pick out the difference on this in a moment because I think I'm getting some clarity from this conversation about that. People have desires to become famous, and these days in the influencer era, it's more specifically that people want to make a career out of being famous without necessarily having a separate value add skill set. So the value proposition is that I'm famous and therefore I'm a living billboard and I can promote and advertise some other products, and that is the value proposition. And there's a lot of, I think it's just very, very easy to to be judgmental about it. I am, personally even, and I know plenty of really, really smart people who are very good people, who just very instinctively roll their eyes at that kind of stuff. And intellectually, it's so understandable to do that. For me, it's really interesting how we've ended up in this place, and I'm not particularly interested in analyzing the social trajectory of how, influencer era has come about. But the thing that stands out to me, just thinking about this in the flow of this conversational meditation, is that the difference between desire and goals is, as you said, desire can get in the way of goals. As desire is where that attachment to outcome lives. It's that energy of I want something without really being aware of who the I is. Whereas a goal could be something that is just a marker in the process that you marry.
Yeah, that's a healthy way of putting it, though, right?
I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, that's the point that's what I like about these conversations being.
Yeah,
And that's why,
and I will catch myself out and admit that I was being righteous.
That's okay. We're only trying.
Yeah, I was being righteous. I think everyone needs to experience what they need to experience and to build their insights. But what's really interesting about that documentary was they picked the 3 people out of 4,000 and they, used their growth hacking skills to get them famous. 2 of the people, when they started to see their fame grow and the fake comments and the fake likes, they actually decided to bow out because they felt inauthentic. And so they were left with one person who was willing to go along with the experiment, not because she was famous hungry, but because she goes, look, obviously the whole thing's going to fail if I don't continue. So she went along with it. But it was interesting that dynamic happened.
Yeah, that's interesting. Did you get a lot of press in your entrepreneurial days around Valtio? Like, did you?
No.
I guess what I'm asking is, did you get a taste of
within
fame?
Within a circle, yeah, sure. Within the startup industry, Salesforce industry, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I thought about that is because I've had a few different moments in my life where I've had a brush with not mainstream fame, but just what it feels like to be. Because my definition of fame is really simple, right? Someone recognizes you who you don't know, and they recognize you from something that you've done outside of that. And if it happens like a one-off and very, very sporadically, that's not the same thing as getting a sense of what famous feels like.
Yeah.
But when you have some sort of a pattern start to emerge, even if it's very low level, and if you have enough self-awareness, you can get a taste of it. So when I was younger, I remember there was a community theater play that I acted in, and I was the main lead, and there were, it was a significant audience, maybe 200-300 people at least. And I remember after the show, I came down and there was a kid. I'll never forget this. There was a kid who asked me for my autograph, and I was so shocked. Like, what? And this is not like, I'm not that old, so this wasn't even like, you could have asked for a photo or something. I didn't even know people still cared about autographs. But on top of that, he wanted me to give him an autograph, and I gave him an autograph. And in that moment, there was like this surge of ego electricity going, and it wasn't like oh yeah, I'm the shit. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like,
up an acting career in Hollywood.
Yeah, no, it wasn't even that far. it was just
Break
it was
the mainstream Western Hollywood. Here I come.
Exactly, that's what it was. No, it was like a subtle awareness that suddenly everybody's actually aware of me, which when you're on stage, particularly, I think theater lends itself to this because it's very much in the flow. Like, you don't have opportunities like you do in film, and I've acted in film as well, and you don't have that opportunity of stepping back, seeing people look at something that you're also looking at yourself, and it's not so cut up and interspersed that you can start getting caught up in your ego. When you're in the flow of just performing on stage, there's a kind of natural state to it where you're just playing the character. You're not actually, it doesn't feel like a mindful performance. It's a mindless, in a good way, a mindless flowing activity. But when you come off the stage and you,
can I offer a correction? I would say it was mindful. Were you in flow in the role, absorbed in the moment? Or were you thinking, I'm going to be famous? I landed that line so well, I'm going to be famous. That's mindless.
That's fair. Yes, I was mindful in the point of what I was doing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Good catch.
How did it make you feel?
I don't remember anything else other than what I described, in sense of it was just like subtle awareness of everybody, of people watching me. But then, as I alluded to just now, I acted in a feature film later as well, and it wasn't a mainstream feature film, but it was a legitimate feature film. It was a proper production with a big cast and crew, and I had a small. So I was one of the actors in a short film, in a series of short films that was collated to make a feature film, like an anthology series these days, a little bit like that. Kind of like, Black Mirror type, you could imagine. So I was in, one of those episodes. Probably these days, that's how it would be formatted. And yeah, that was also, there was quite a bit of promotion and quite a bit of happening around that at the time, for a short period of time. So there was also that feeling of it. But then there were other situations which weren't related to media or entertainment. So in the business community, when I was traveling the world and speaking on a lot of stages, doing a lot of public speaking, that feeling of going into a VC-run conference where I'm running a workshop and I don't know anyone in the room, literally nobody, but everybody knows that I'm going to be there and coming because they've promoted me beforehand. So that's that's a sense of acknowledgement of what that kind of fame might feel like.
Okay.
And there've been some like other situations like that as well. But I realized it's all.
What was the desire behind that? Wanting to
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. So there actually was no desire, but that sense of external validation that you can get caught up on actually ended up creating desire, which did get in the way of goals.
Because?
I don't know. I've never thought about this before. That's what I love about these conversations with you. It's just when you raise that point of how desire is futile if it gets in the way of goals. I've just thought about that now. And it's not even as simple or as, overt
But you've got a
as
first person example. You got your first. So desire started to build when you got some acknowledgement, but that also got in the way of goals thereafter. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Is
Maybe
that what
maybe
you're
it
trying
was
to
some
say?
sort of a maybe it was some sort of an attachment to say that I now want what I'm getting, whereas I didn't actually want it before.
Uh-huh.
The goal was to be in the flow of those things, whether it was in the flow of acting, and acting is not just about acting. It has so much to do with belonging, with the sense of community. When you're going through a production process, whether it's theater or film, it's such a bonding experience with
Yes.
with
Yes.
everyone that's involved. That's a great thing about being involved in those kinds of
Yeah.
teams and projects, and
That's
and
an
there's a
example.
flow to that as well. Yeah.
That's an example of marrying the process.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's 100% what it is. And it's interesting, I'm just thinking about this is probably going off on a bit of a different tangent, but I'm just thinking about how a lot of solopreneurs get really in their way because they don't have a process to marry. They end up getting really attached to the desire of what they want because they don't know how to set goals that help them actually get detached from
Mm.
spontaneous desires that will
Mm.
lead them
Yes.
astray. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think there's something here. Thank you for raising it this way. The the purpose of self-discipline is associated with a goal achievement is to build a habit. And if you build a habit, there's no need for self-discipline as much anymore. In actual fact, there's a limited supply of self-discipline according to the research. So you want to use self-discipline sparingly, but strategically, so that you can build the right habits to be able to achieve your big goals, right? Your long-term desires. So this is why it's not a linear thing. I think what's appropriate is appropriate depending on the stage and phase, and depending on the maturity of the entrepreneur. As an example, I want to be a unicorn. In 5 years' time, we think we're solving a big problem, and the puck's going to be, where we're playing to in the next 3 years, and blah blah blah. Okay, these are all beautiful concepts and words, and they're great for investors and great to pep you up, But the reality is, everything you said is not fueling you on a day to day in the present moment. And that's why I think setting the right long term goal and desire. I said it again. That's being righteous. It's so hard to do. I'm only talking from my experience, obviously, my own personal experience.
Yeah.
But I'm
So
also,
just talk about your experience. Maybe we shouldn't
yeah,
talk
but I'm
from our
also,
experience.
I have to say, I've got to weigh
Hmm.
in a little bit on top of that and say, I've spent minimum 12 hours with 400 startup founders, and there's some patterns there, right? I can't
Yeah.
deny that. And the pattern is those people who are authentically connected to the problem and are curious and coachable are far more successful than anyone else, right?
Hmm.
So the whole coachability piece is being open and vulnerable to taking criticism, to dispelling your own biases associated with what the world needs, and
Hmm.
setting up experiments to validate whether what you believe is the solution is something that someone is desirable, feasible, and what's the other one?
Viable.
Viable. And that's where the balancing act comes in. This is coming back to your point of, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are not ready for the journey. There's
Hmm.
also a lot of general humans who are not ready for the journey, but that's okay. That's okay, because if we change the bias towards needing the experience to I'll pick it up and learn along the way, and have the flexibility of I don't know, but I will learn, versus I need to know, and that, I need to know to look good, to achieve. This is what everyone tells me, is very restrictive, very, activates your parasympathetic, it just gets you stressed, right? And we don't perform better under stress. But if you took a um, expansive, broad view and saying, "Oh, no, I can learn," we can learn, we can build the capacity, we can hire that in, whatever it might be along the way, then that's much more capacity inducing versus going, if I don't get to 150,000 followers, blah, blah, by a certain date, it's really restrictive. I think what's really obvious is, who are you? Having a felt experience of who are you, and who do you want to be seen as? Because there's two worlds, right? There's your inner world and the outer world. And, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get some kind of safety, build some security, but also build some confidence in your ability to achieve certain things that you've never achieved before. And that's exciting. That's worth living for, right? But expecting that when I get to 150,000 followers, I'll be happier than I am right now. I'm not saying that may not happen. What are you willing to give up to be famous in this example? What are you willing to give up to be a unicorn? What are you willing to give up? You see, it's about giving up. Not, yeah. And a lot of it has to do with things you haven't considered yet or experienced yet, but you're desiring. I'm willing to give up the desire to have the freedom to do whatever I want today for the next 10 years as a startup. And, some of the other projects I'm involved in is something called mindful self-discipline with someone who we know, Giovanni Deistman. And it's really amazing to actually see, because I coach some people on this methodology, to try and basically apply a new lens to the self-discipline from one that's, military-based to one that's monk-based, self-love-based versus I'm not good enough. One that is more about pursuing my future self. Who do I want to be in the future? Now. And, I've been totally guilty of chasing the goal so much that I don't even notice the process, don't even notice the progress, I don't even notice what's in this point right now. And I'm not even present, not even here. I'm actually triggering myself on an idea about my future. Disassociated with the present. And I think this speaks to your sense of self-esteem. I'm not not enoughness, the consciousness of not enoughness. And I know that I've burnt my family and relationships in the past due to my hurriedness, because I'm not enough and I need to achieve a goal. When I achieve that goal, I'll be able to relax and spend time with you then. But time goes on, and I regret that, right? Because my kids grow up, then they flee the nest, and now I find myself in my early 50s, and I go, oh my God, I can't get that time back. And now I might be ready, but they're not ready. They've flown the nest. So what are the consequences of goals? What are the consequences of desires? Because if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to many other things. So I think having a inquiry-based approach to this desire or this goal, is it something I really want? I really, really want? What will I feel when if and when I achieve it? So just being more conscious about it. Taking two perspectives, the external world and your internal world. Your first person experience and the third person experience, 50-50. at least that's been my journey. Is, I tried everything that everyone else told me to do, and I innocently believed that that's the path and that's the approach, blah blah blah. And I got there in various ways, and I went, shit, still unhappy. Yeah, is that resonating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of things coming to mind, coming to heart actually. There's I work with a lot of people who, because they're, now that I think about it, it's been quite a pattern in my career actually, that I've worked with a lot of purpose-driven leaders, or at least purpose-oriented leaders. So they work in spaces where there is a lot of moral righteousness, not in an arrogant way, just in a sense of, empirically, you're not working towards selfish outcomes, you're working towards societal outcomes, like helping vulnerable communities, saving the environment, healing people, things like that, right? And I notice a lot of these people, and this is not just the paradox of goals, it's actually the irony in reflecting on what you're saying, is that they get so caught up in the goals that they actually forget what the goal is, because they get pushed around they get pushed around the environment from a vague sense of desire that is probably conditioned into their subconscious, that they lose sight of what the goals actually were, in the sense that we were talking about those goals earlier. So there's a desire to succeed, and maybe that's actually what the futility of the desire is really about, in the way that I was thinking about it. It's specifically the desire of succeeding in anything.
Yeah.
That you have this desire for success, and there's a futility to that, because if you get so attached, and it doesn't take a lot to become so attached to desiring some sort of a success, you lose sight of what goals you had set, what goalposts you had set along the way to keep you aware of the process that you're supposed to be following. And that's why I see this all the time. People design great processes, or in business terms you might call it strategies, and then they completely wear off the strategies, because they'll get caught up in the politics, or they'll get caught up in the drama of things in the vicinity of that strategy, and they're not able to follow through from one goal to the next, or from one check post or milestone to the next, because they're just caught up in this energy of desire that just makes them more and more and more anxious. And they can't even, if you ask them, why are you doing this, as you asked at the beginning, chances are they won't be able to articulate it very well, or at least not very authentically. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. I think we're all guilty of that. But I have noticed that, especially in purpose-driven businesses, and there's probably different maturities across purpose-driven businesses. There's ones who use it as a way to make themselves feel good out there in the market for attracting talent, whatever. And then there's those
Hustling.
that actually, sorry,
hustling. It's like
it's
a form of hustle culture, right?
It's a hustle culture. We're purpose-driven; everything's fine. And then there's something in between, and then there's the opposite of that, which are practitioners, who are leaders, who are entrepreneurs, who walk the talk, have had a felt direct experience as to the value of the purpose, and may veer off a little bit, but they don't veer off much very far. They always come back to core purpose. So, and that's where you need to, there's a level of metacognitive awareness that's required to be able to bring it back, to go, oh yeah, that's what's our intention again? What's my intention when I scold an employee? Or what's my, I mean, is this in line with the purpose of the business? Like, come back. No, I wouldn't want to be treated that way. So what is the best way to get the best out of my team and to achieve our purpose in market? But all that stuff is done in the moment. You and I have seen so many business plans that never materialize. Never. Part of my past roles was to see business plans and get them ready for due diligence and stress test them, and best spreadsheets in the world. All of them fail. But it's interesting to see, someone can run up a business plan, and mathematically speaking, it does look like it's going to be, feasible. But the compliance of like what we planned 5 years ago and what we executed is always askew. So that's my point. It's futile. The plan is futile.
So how do you reconcile that with this thing that you were saying about marry the process?
And again, this is why there are no absolutes. So if I was just say marry the process, divorce the results. What process? You just told me that the process that we're planning, that we just planned, is futile. Yeah, that's great. That's because my understand, like in the moment, the process is different to the process that I planned about the future. It's very different. So if we were to break it down into something that I would feel comfortable with, which is, oh, great, thank you for the 3-year plan. What does that look like when you break it down to 8-hour workday every day? And how does it change sequentially as you go through the different stages and phases? Having that flexibility is really important. So what does your day look like? What does the perfect morning look like to achieve the goal? And what does the perfect evening look like to achieve the goal? At a felt sense, behavior-based perspective. Because then you're basically going, oh, I see the goal was to be a unicorn, but I want to feel in flow every day. I want to feel good that I can say no to things in the pursuit of to be a unicorn, that I've mapped out and reverse engineered from unicorn to idea. Now, that assumes perfect wisdom, perfect knowledge. No one has the perfect knowledge on what you're going to face along the way. I was talking to someone the other day who was saying, I just want to find an investor who's going to invest in my purpose-built business, purpose-driven business, who's also purpose-driven. And I go, how do you know? And they said, oh, A, B, C, D, and has read Simon Sinek's latest book. I said, great, perfect. So you scrutinize this person, you qualify them out of the sea of investors that you got, and this person is the perfect investor, not going to get in your way, and he's aligned to the purpose. And 12 months from now, they're getting divorced. Does that change anything for them? Possibly everything. All of a sudden, money's an issue, and all of a sudden, they want to return an investment. They can't wait 9 years. They're calling you on at the end of the quarter, going, "When am I going to get my money back?" And try to potentially take control. So that's what I'm saying.
They don't like Simon Sinek anymore.
Well, they don't like Simon Sinek anymore. They went to an event and he whatever, or he's turned whatever. Things you can't control. So what I'm saying is, you can only control what things mean in between here. Whatever happens, happens, and what's never going to happen will never happen. And now I've gone a little bit out, but but I think it's important to bring it back to what is the one thing I can do right now in support of my future self, my future, yeah,
Mm.
and not really being attached to the future self, but using the future self as an exemplar of something that motivates you to say no now to the desires that get me off the path to achieve what I think I will get when I achieve the goal, what I think I will get when I achieve the goal. Because we've all bought into the when you're wealthy, you'll be happy and everything, and then you can stream off into the sunset and have a you know have a wonderful life. It's not true. So we put a lot of energy in that in our life, right, out there, out into the future, and as a result, it blinds what's already here now. And this is the paradox of the whole damn thing, right? The whole paradox is what do you mean? Because I can feel a part of me going, you know, MBA says, if you really broke it down and you were to analyze your life in the last year, did anything go according to plan? According to what you planned? No. I didn't think we were going to have another lockdown for another 3 months. Nothing could have planned for that. I didn't plan for that. And I had a direct experience of this thing where I had to move out house on my own in a big place and I had to move shit around. And I noticed that I had a plan. I scheduled everything. Yeah, I set a goal. I had a deadline. Yet my body would get up and do stuff that was not on the plan, and it would do it randomly in its own different way. And I was observing as a witness, and it actually worked out better than the plan that I had actually planned, because I kind of was experimenting with just surrendering my attachment to the outcome, and just went, well, what actually didn't even ask, what do you want to do today? Like, what are we going to start with today? It was a big move on my own. Never done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the direct experience of, holy shit, this is actually already happening. The intention was move out, and everything just self-organized. And I think it speaks to the futility of desire and paradox of goals. Because I set the goal up, all right, but I really enjoyed the process so much that I lost myself in the process, and somehow I ended up at the destination and went, hold on a sec, that's right. I reviewed the goal that I had written down on a spreadsheet and blah, blah, blah. And I went, I didn't do any of that. Not even in the sequence of that, let alone in the way it was planned in terms of milestones. So the whole self-improvement training, industry that's all around all this space is probably not happy about what I'm saying right now, but it's a massive industry that's just propped up by appeasing our conceptual sense of awareness. Conceptual sense of ourselves.
It's interesting, you said self-organizing. I think I got alert to something there, that in the world of agile business, or business agility, I should say, not just because a lot of people think agile is about project management, but it's evolved to become become a philosophy that that has so many overlaps with other philosophies in the same space, like self-management, teal organizations from Frederick Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, design theory in business, lots of things. Yeah. Agile happens to be probably the most mainstream in corporate organizations these days. And one of the big things that Agile and these other things talk about is self-organizing teams. and the general principle of self-organization. I never thought about it from the perspective of a leader allowing their team to self-organize because of what you just said in terms of its relationship to the futility of desire and the paradox of goals. That if you try and control, if you marry a process and then you end up in a toxic relationship with that process because you're trying, you're too controlling or emotionally abusive to it, then you'll actually get too attached to the desire and lose sight of what the intention behind those goals actually were. So from that perspective, if you're a leader and I mean a leader in the sense of, yeah,
there's just a little thing there. You got so married to the process, it actually turned into a goal.
Yeah, go on. That's interesting.
Yeah. So you got attached to the process so much that it became an attachment. Yeah, it became an attachment. I think there's a nuance just in that, just because we can easily flip out into, because we're so trained and conditioned to the goal setting, achieving, doing. Jesus, that's the leading cause of suffering is the addiction to the doer. I'm not, and it's baked in. It rests on the loins of I'm not enough already. My thesis is, my hypothesis, and my direct experience is, I'm already enough. What would I like to experience and build, and then byproduct, build, achieve, goal. So sorry, but land your main point, because I think there's something beautiful there.
I lost track of it, but I don't mind. What you said is really, I think, where I was going to land anyway. That's awesome. What you just said. I am not enough is the foundational drive to try and substitute that not enoughness with goals and desires.
And it's so subtle. It's baked in right from the beginning of our existence as a small kid going to school. As soon as you walk into school, you're not enough. As soon as you walk into the office, you're not enough. Until you're not, what is it? You're only as good as your last month, quarter, deal.
Yes.
Right? That's total bullshit.
Your KPIs. We don't care about your self-worth.
Framework is coming from scarcity. But if I came from I'm a fully unlimited being and I can learn along the way the things that I don't know that I don't know, going into something, because the problem is it sets up the persona of I need to act like I know everything, be the smartest person in the room. And it sets up the addiction to the I know mind. And as you know, the work that you do from a collaboration and innovation standpoint, you can't start broadly if I come in with an I know mind. But it's really scary for a lot of organizations and cultures to come in with I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah. So how do you scale that at a team level, project level, organization level? Because if you say to everyone, drop your goals, no more OKRs, no more KPIs, everyone's enough. As a team, we are enough. What does that look like in terms of progress?
Again, the paradox comes in here as well. Goals and measurements and what did you call KPIs are important to measure progress.
Yeah.
But not be attached to the progress.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only a conceptual sense of self that is addicted to thinking that, the goals will,
So reconcile that with the point you were making about getting so married to the process that the process becomes a goal. I want to flesh that out a bit more.
I guess what I mean by process is how do you build self-governed habits that are aligned to my intrinsic drivers, because I love I love to allow me to get into flow, which is the balance between challenge and skill with a consequence. The consequence is of missing the goal by, in accordance to a milestone, a date, let's say. Because then that will allow me to get into flow versus being lazy or being anxious. And so, like, there's a balance there, right? It's not a zero sum, turn it on, let's go. No, too much anxiety, not good. Too much boredom, not good. But, without the key word here is intrinsic drivers. What is the one thing that I really want to achieve? And so when you go back to the self-governing teams and scalability, giving the responsibility out to the team so the decision making is made out on the street as close to the customer as possible allows the team to feel mastery, autonomy, and purpose. The individuals and the teams, which lightens the load. And now you're seeing a lot of talk around holacracy, right? The flatter organization, self-governing, out in the periphery, at the peninsula of where your company touches the market. What that does is create a team of people who think and act like owners, and that's the gold standard, in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I use that language myself. I talk about shared leadership, but it has a lot to do with autonomy and alignment, which comes back to shared sense of ownership. Not necessarily shared ownership, but just you own something that's a part of the whole, and you own it together, and you're aligned, and you have enough autonomy to move forward with a sense of purpose and conviction.
Yeah. In the end, it comes back to a sense of control and safety at the periphery. Absolutely. And from a governance standpoint, it causes a lot of challenges because historically we haven't operated that way. But having a band of tribes out there, or squads or whatever, and it works with Agile, the Agile movement. Everything's moving towards this, by the way. I mean, it all makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If you have a look at Agile, if you have a look at center design, holacracy, it's all moving to distributed and then work from home. That's probably fast tracking that even further. And it comes down to one core thing: trust. At an organizational level, do I trust? Do we have the systems and processes and trust to enable our people? If we had surveillance systems,
that scales back to the individual as well. It actually scales back to exactly what you were saying. It's also about self-trust. If I trust myself, I am enough, then I don't need to have any anxious attachment to a desire.
Yeah.
That's the futility of the desire, right? The more you desire, the less you trust in what you already are.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Nice catch. Beautiful.
Better write that down in case I need to tweet it to my 150,000 followers.
Yeah, nice. That's great. Love it. And then it's about, using self-awareness to figure out, was I in alignment today? Where did I fall out? Journal it. What can I do better tomorrow? Because really, at the end of the day, it's a lot of it is to do with deconditioning ourselves from old systems and models that either collectively got conditioned or I personally got conditioned. We don't realize, because we're in the bubble, how much, there's a lot of work going into collective trauma, societal trauma associated with that we inherit, whether biologically in our genes, which they've proven to be the case, that I'm suffering from the suffering of my great grandparents, ancestors. Somehow you know, biologically in my body, let alone the societal things that I grew up with in Australia, and what is in the what has seemingly seeped into my subconscious and influencing the way I see the world. And being willing to kind of take a fresh view and going, I don't know what I don't know about how I'm biased right now. So that's really been thinking broadly, and that's, positive psychology spends a lot of time on broad thinking, and that an addiction to negative emotions causes a less broad view. Yeah.
I think we should start wrapping up gradually.
Yeah.
So what do you desire?
I desire diligence in my metacognition to discover the truth of what's here now, to be able to systematically clear obscurations so that I can fundamentally achieve what's already here now but I'm not aware of. Some people would call this awakened awareness. The West would call it a positivity ratio of 5-1, scientifically speaking. Um, and a consistent connection with my amness, my I amness. Because the more I practice, the more I do this, the more lucky I get to be able to dip into that. And let me tell you, better than any unicorn exit that I've ever achieved. Not that I have, but and you know what? It's unconditional. It's always there, and the only one that's getting in the way of that is me. And that then being coming from that basis of operation, then I'm a much more available, potentiated, enabled person for others, versus being caught up in my stories of myself. So I desire liberation from my thoughts.
Nice. Very nice.
And what I've noticed is that I can still function in the world. I don't have to go into a cave. And I think the 21st century, I think the opportunity now is to take some of these old, stories of the cave yogis and blah blah blah, and the roaming yogis and all that stuff, is to actually no, we don't have to escape society. We can be awake in society. And when you shift your basis of operation, knowing and doing, from being, then because it comes from enoughness, and our whole society has come from not enoughness, can you imagine how much more we can create that is more meaningful, sustainable, anti-climate change, like good for everything, because we're more self-aware. The basis of our operation in most of our organizations has been lack. And it's difficult to really, at this level, conceptual level of our engagement, I'm only pointing to it, but I had two people that I guided into certain practices yesterday, and one of them, without any prompting from me, said, "Oh my God, this is a whole new operating system." And I went, "Oh, that's exactly the goal. The goal was, do you think you can actually operate from this more I am enoughness ground?" And that's how you, because then all of a sudden you've got this like cleaned up program out in the world, possibly, and of people exploring more about being curious to go, oh, well, I can't believe I didn't have to take a drug. I didn't have to do anything major apart from really discovering, taking awareness and sending it back to awareness versus out there, thinking my happiness is out there and I've got to achieve a goal out there. Desires are typically externally focused. And then becoming, being, as one of my teachers would say, being in the marketplace, being a father, being an entrepreneur, and operating from this ground of being that is, in your first person experience, full of enoughness. And reprioritizing experience. What do I want to experience? What does this company want to experience? What do we want to experience as a collective? What do you want to experience? What do you want to experience intrinsically? I'm not going to tell you, and maybe we're aligned somehow. I think the one that's a common universal ground is I just want to be happy. So far, I haven't found anyone who says, oh, no, I don't want to be happy. So, whoever sees this video probably, going, this is all over the place. It's interesting. And the conceptual sense of mind won't get this. But your being will, immediately, undeniably.
So I just started choking. Needed to take a lozenge.
Oh, you okay? Who's the one that's choking?
We are choking. We are collectively, spiritually one.
We're collectively
we are all choking. The universe is choking.
The universe is choking. Something good's happening.
No, but I heard everything you said. Yeah, it'd be interesting next time to, maybe this can be the focus of our next conversation, to explore this question. I am enough, but are we enough?
Huh. I like that. That's, wow. I haven't actually put any processing power on that before. Interesting.
For a conversational meditation, I took a lot of notes. This is interesting.
Yeah. Well, if I am enough, then we must all be enough.
Maybe.
I'm not saying
let's explore it more.
Me separate from you, but if I, okay, yeah, let's explore that. Let's save that for next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Always a pleasure.
We never know where these are going to go, but
no, that's the point. I feel like
I'll try next time to ask more questions.
That's okay. You don't have to.
In terms of improving,
the thing I love about this is
reducing my want to be right. If I ask more questions, it'll help a lot.
Look, I mean, I won't reveal our ages specifically, just for the sake of being polite. But you have a substantial experience over me, and therefore, there's a lot of wisdom that I'm naturally very curious to pick on. So I'm just a lot more selfish when it comes to that. For me, this is it's an opportunity to ask and therefore learn a lot more. But the reason I came up with this name of Conversational Meditations is because I realized that I've never come up with this name before. You and I have had these conversations, but I've done this a lot in my life, and I've realized the value of talking to people in a way where you're not you're not necessarily exchanging information for the sake of trying to solve a problem. You're exchanging information and ideas for the sake of experiencing a kind of flow. And it is a kind of meditation. And I think the reason that I acknowledged this as a meditation is because of this concept that you and I came up with of, trying not to be right. Because when you go into a conversation with a desire or a goal or an intention to teach something or to specifically learn something, and you have a very concrete concept of there needs to be some sort of intelligence extracted from this conversation, you fall in the trap of all the paradoxes that we talked about, which is you get out of the flow, and there's like a performative element that comes across.
There's an anxiety towards it as well, and it's restrictive. But I have to admit that I've felt in flow in this conversation with you today. I felt like sometimes I almost dropped out in terms of the collective flow, even though we're not in the same room, because of this being able to be in the moment and ask curious questions which kind of opened up even more depth. And so, yeah, I felt embodied, felt flowy for me.
Yeah, same. That's what I love about it. I think, it'll be interesting to explore if we should expand the format or, because I thought about, like, obviously we don't really care about having much of an audience. If someone wants to join, they join. It's an interesting experience to live stream this anyway.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it'd be interesting to have a circle version of this. I've been a part of a couple of those sporadically, and I know you run the Founder Circle, which is a closed sort of group as well on that. I love those ideas too. But yeah, you reach a certain point where very quickly it becomes really it becomes something that you end up facilitating. Whereas this, just talking to you, I get a particular selfish pleasure out of that flowness that doesn't come from having a group conversation necessarily. And I get that same pleasure listening to others having conversations like that as well, which is why I thought some people might enjoy listening to this.
I think, we can experiment, but the opportunity also is there for you and I to kind of get comfortable with the shared collective that you and I are building, the shared art. And then, because I've noticed this with two other groups that I've been involved with in the last 2 years, and then what happens is you open it up to others, and but the common denominator of our collective heart pulls them into that frequency, and it makes it even more there's a bigger chance that frequency will expand to include them, and that they get pulled into it. And so you don't have 10 talking heads trying to be right all the time and cut each other off. If we had 10 people coming from enoughness, how would that meeting go, versus if it wasn't the case?
I think that's very wise. That's a way to look at it, really. You got to curate it in such a way that intention of we're going to try to not be right is maintained. And that'll make sure that the conversation still feels like a meditation, and it doesn't become like a conference of posturing.
Mindless talking heads. But maybe you can start off the session with a little practice, 10-minute practice, and so whoever watches the recordings or is on live gets an experience of dropping into their body and trying to maintain 51% of your awareness in that ground as we speak. Improves the chances of us falling out of that.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's watching this right now, still leave a comment and you can let us know what you think.
Cool. Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you, brother.
I will talk to you soon. I will stop streaming and we'll have a quick wind down offline.
Okay.